On a bustling avenue in Meridian Heights, a distinguished black man walks confidently, his gold bracelet catching the afternoon light. That elegant accessory draws unwanted attention from a white female officer who immediately assumes theft. Without evidence or proper procedure, she handcuffs him and drags him to the station with smug certainty. What she doesn't realize is that she's just made the career-ending mistake of her life. Before we dive deeper into this story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Your perspective matters to our community. The late summer heat shimmered above the pavement of Meridian Heights, Massachusetts, where colonial architecture stood proudly alongside modern glass storefronts. The city prided itself on progressive politics and cultural diversity, though beneath its polished veneer ran currents of tension as old as the nation itself. On this particular Wednesday, as shadows lengthened across Hawthorne Square, the air felt unusually still, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Dr. Marcus Ellison moved with deliberate grace through the afternoon crowd, his tailored navy suit setting him apart from the casual summer attire around him. Tall with broad shoulders, his dark skin contrasted with the crisp white of his shirt collar, and around his wrist gleamed a handcrafted gold bracelet with intricate engravings of family heirloom passed down from his grandfather, a civil rights attorney who had once argued before the Supreme Court. The bracelet wasn't merely jewelry. It was legacy incarnate, each delicate pattern telling the story of struggles overcome and battles hard won. He had just delivered the keynote address at the Meridian Medical Conference, where his research on algorithmic bias in healthcare diagnostics had received a standing ovation. The irony wasn't lost on him, spending hours explaining how systems perpetuate discrimination, only to step outside into a world where those same biases awaited him, regardless of his credentials or contributions. His conference badge still hung from his pocket. Dr. Marcus Ellison, Chief of Neurosurgery. As he turned onto Whitman Boulevard, his path took him past a row of police vehicles parked outside the district station. Leaning against one cruiser stood Officer Vanessa Caldwell, early 30s, blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, sunglasses perched on her head despite the fading light. Vanessa had been with the force for 8 years, rising quickly not through exceptional skill, but through an uncanny ability to align herself with the right superiors. Her father had been police, as had his father before him, a legacy of law enforcement that ran through her veins like a birthright. To her, the badge wasn't a symbol of service, but a shield that legitimized her suspicions and prejudices, a dividing line between those who maintained order and those who threatened it. Her eyes narrowed as they caught the glint of Marcus's bracelet, and something in her posture shifted. Perhaps it was his unhurried confidence, or the way he carried himself with natural authority, or simply that he was a black man wearing something valuable who didn't acknowledge her presence. That wasn't neutrality. That was disrespect. "Hey, you there," she called out sharply, pushing herself away from the cruiser. Marcus paused, turning with measured composure, his expression carefully neutral. His heart rate increased slightly, not from fear but from the familiar calculation every black man learns early: how to navigate encounters with law enforcement without being perceived as threatening. The mental checklist activated automatically. Keep hands visible, speak calmly, maintain eye contact but not too intensely, don't make sudden movements. "Yes, officer," he replied, his voice deep and steady. Vanessa approached with deliberate steps, her hand resting casually near her holster. "That bracelet you're wearing, where'd you get something like that?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. Marcus blinked once, maintaining his composure despite the familiar sting of the moment. He'd been here before in graduate school when campus security demanded to see his ID while white classmates walked by unchallenged. At the hospital, when a patient refused treatment from the help until learning he was the chief surgeon. At a jewelry store just last month when he'd been followed by security while shopping for his wife's anniversary gift. It's a family heirloom, he stated simply. My grandfather's. Vanessa's lips curled slightly. An heirloom? Looks pretty expensive for an heirloom. You got proof of ownership? Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. I don't typically carry documentation for my personal belongings, officer. Is there a problem? Pedestrians began to slow their pace, some stopping entirely to watch the interaction unfold. A young mother pulled her child closer. An elderly man shook his head slightly. A teenager discreetly raised his phone to record. Vanessa positioned herself to block his path, her stance widening. There's been a report, she said, voice hardening. Luxury jewelry stolen from Harrington's on 5th. Gold bracelet, male suspect, dark complexion. Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say? That's not possible, Marcus replied, his voice remaining measured despite the anger building beneath his calm exterior. I've been speaking at the medical conference all day. I'm Dr. Marcus Ellison, Chief of Neurosurgery at Meridian General. He reached slowly toward his pocket for his conference badge, but Vanessa's hand immediately moved to her weapon. Keep your hands where I can see them, she snapped. Everyone's got a story, don't they? Doctor, lawyer, whatever sounds impressive, doesn't change what I'm seeing. And what exactly are you seeing, officer? Marcus asked, his words precise and cutting. Vanessa stepped closer, invading his personal space. I'm seeing someone who matches a description, wearing stolen property, getting defensive when questioned by law enforcement. I'm not being defensive. I'm stating facts, Marcus replied, and I'd like to speak with your supervising officer. Something dangerous flashed in Vanessa's eyes. You don't make demands here. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. Now. A small crowd had gathered, smartphones appearing like fireflies in the dusk. Marcus knew this moment that, prepared for it his entire life, had discussed it with his father, his colleagues, his students. The script was familiar, but the humiliation never dulled. He thought of his two sons at home, 12 and 14, and how he'd taught them to survive encounters like this. He thought of his grandfather's words, "Dignity cannot be arrested." I do not consent to this detention, he stated clearly, loud enough for bystanders to hear. You have no probable cause, and I have committed no crime. Vanessa's patience snapped. That's it. You're under arrest for obstruction and suspected theft. She roughly grabbed his arm, spinning him around with unnecessary force. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into his wrists as she tightened them a notch beyond necessary. You're making a serious mistake, Marcus said quietly as she pushed him toward the cruiser. Vanessa laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Save it for someone who cares, Doctor. As she shoved him into the back seat, Marcus caught sight of a young black woman in the crowd filming everything. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her the slightest nod. She nodded back, understanding the silent communication document, everything. This was how resistance worked now, not through physical struggle, but through exposure, through making visible what power preferred to keep hidden. Inside the cruiser, Marcus sat perfectly still, his mind racing through protocols and procedures, rights and regulations. With subtle movements, he managed to press the emergency contact button on his smartwatch, a feature he had programmed years ago for precisely this scenario. 3 quick pulses confirmed the message had been sent. The bracelet on his wrist seemed to grow heavier, its significance transforming from heirloom to evidence, from connection to his past to determinant of his immediate future. Vanessa slid into the driver's seat, adjusting her mirror to watch him. Comfortable back there? She asked with mock concern. Marcus didn't respond, maintaining his dignified silence. His grandfather had taught him that sometimes the most powerful response was no response at all, a lesson learned during sit-ins at segregated lunch counters in the 1960s. "Not so talkative now, huh?" Vanessa continued, starting the engine. "All that education doesn't help much when the cuffs are on, does it?" As the cruiser pulled away from the curb, Marcus noticed the growing crowd, the phone still recording, the expressions of outrage and concern. He closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. This wasn't just about him anymore. It had become something larger, a moment that would ripple outward in ways neither he nor Officer Caldwell could yet comprehend. Across town, at Meridian Heights Police Headquarters, Commissioner Alexandra Ellison was reviewing budget proposals when her phone vibrated with an emergency alert. One glance at the screen made her blood run cold. It was Marcus's emergency signal, accompanied by GPS coordinates. Alexandra stood so quickly, her chair crashed against the wall behind her, startling the two captains she'd been meeting with. "Meeting's over," she announced, already moving toward the door. "Family emergency." Captain Reynolds, a veteran officer with salt and pepper hair, rose with concern. "Commissioner, is everything all right?" Alexandra paused at the doorway, her expression tightly controlled. "No, Reynolds, it's not. My husband has just been detained by one of our officers." Reynolds's eyebrows shot up. "Dr. Ellison? On what grounds?" "That's what I intend to find out," Alexandra replied, her voice dangerously calm. "And God help the officer responsible if they've overstepped." As she strode through the corridors of headquarters, officers and administrative staff instinctively moved out of her path. Alexandra Ellison had risen through the ranks with a reputation for uncompromising integrity and reform-minded leadership. Her appointment as commissioner 2 years ago had been celebrated by community activists and met with trepidation by officers resistant to change. She had implemented body camera requirements, civilian oversight committees, and mandatory bias training policies that had earned her respect from the public but resentment from some within the department who viewed her as an outsider despite her 20 years of service. Now, as she rushed to her vehicle, Alexandra felt the collision of her professional and personal worlds with sickening clarity. She had spent her career building systems to prevent exactly what was happening to her husband, yet all her authority, all her reforms, hadn't been enough to protect him from the very department she led. Back at the precinct, Vanessa marched Marcus through the front doors with theatrical authority, gripping his arm above the elbow as if parading a trophy. She guided him past the front desk, where Sergeant Rivera looked up with immediate concern. "What's going on, Caldwell?" Rivera asked, eyeing Marcus's professional attire and calm demeanor. "Caught this one with stolen property," Vanessa replied smugly. "Gold bracelet from Harrington's. Got defensive when questioned." Rivera frowned slightly. "Was there a bolo I missed? I don't remember any reports from Harrington's today." Vanessa's expression flickered momentarily. "Called in while I was on patrol. Didn't have time to file the paperwork yet." Marcus remained silent, observing the exchange with clinical detachment. He noted Rivera's skepticism, the nervous glances from other officers, the subtle shift in atmosphere as Vanessa's story began to unravel. He had spent decades in operating rooms where the slightest change in vital signs could signal catastrophe. He recognized the symptoms of a narrative collapsing under its own weight. "I'd like to make my phone call," Marcus stated calmly. Vanessa scoffed. "You'll get your call when processing is complete. No special treatment here." "It's not special treatment," Rivera interjected. "It's procedure, Caldwell." Vanessa's face hardened. "Since when do you question my arrests, Rivera? This guy was walking around Whitman Boulevard with a gold bracelet worth thousands, acting like he owned the place. You telling me that doesn't warrant investigation?" "I'm telling you we follow protocol," Rivera replied evenly. especially when the suspect is... The suspect is what? Vanessa challenged, her voice rising. Go ahead, say it. The station doors swung open with such force they slammed against the wall. Commissioner Alexandra Ellison stood in the doorway, her uniform impeccable, her expression carved from stone. The room fell into immediate silence, officers freezing mid-motion as if time itself had stopped. Alexandra didn't rush. She walked with measured steps, each footfall echoing against the tile floor. Vanessa's expression shifted from confusion to shock as Alexandra approached. Commissioner, what are you doing here? Alexandra ignored her completely, moving directly to Marcus. With gentle hands, she examined the two tight handcuffs, noting the red marks forming on his wrists. When she finally spoke, her voice was dangerously quiet. Remove these, now. Vanessa hesitated, looking around as if expecting support. Finding none, she fumbled with the keys, her earlier confidence evaporating. Commissioner, I was just following protocol. This suspect? This suspect, Alexandra cut in, her voice like ice, is Dr. Marcus Ellison, Chief of Neurosurgery at Meridian General Hospital. He's also my husband. The color drained from Vanessa's face. Your husband? The man you profiled, detained without cause, and arrested without evidence. Alexandra continued, each word precise and cutting. The man wearing a family heirloom that belonged to his grandfather, Justice William Ellison of the Massachusetts Supreme Court. The handcuffs fell away, and Marcus rubbed his wrists gently, his expression unreadable. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with collective realization and shame. Commissioner, I had no idea, Vanessa began. That's precisely the problem, Alexandra interrupted. You shouldn't need to know who someone is related to in order to treat them with basic human dignity and follow proper procedure. Vanessa's posture crumpled slightly. There was a report. There was no report, Alexandra stated flatly. I checked dispatch records on my way here. No theft at Harrington's, no bolo for stolen jewelry, nothing that would justify stopping Dr. Ellison. You invented a pretext to harass a black man whose only crime was wearing a gold bracelet while walking past you. The truth hung in the air, undeniable and damning. Officers shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Rivera stepped forward. Commissioner, I was just questioning Officer Caldwell about the lack of documentation when you arrived. Alexandra nodded once. Thank you, Sergeant. Your concern is noted. She turned back to Vanessa, who now looked physically ill. Officer Caldwell, surrender your badge and weapon. You're suspended effective immediately, pending full investigation. You can't do that without, Vanessa protested weakly. I can and I am, Alexandra stated. Your body camera was conveniently turned off during this encounter. But fortunately, Dr. Ellison's emergency alert system recorded the entire interaction. Additionally, at least 7 bystanders filmed the arrest. The evidence is overwhelming. Vanessa's hand trembled as she unclipped her badge. It was a mistake, I thought. No. Marcus spoke for the first time since Alexandra's arrival. His voice was calm but carried throughout the room. You didn't think. You reacted based on assumptions and biases that have no place in law enforcement. He straightened his suit jacket, dignity intact despite the ordeal. I don't want your career ended, Officer Caldwell. I want your mindset transformed. That requires more than punishment. It requires education, reflection, and genuine commitment to change. Alexandra looked at her husband with a mixture of pride and sorrow. After a moment, she turned back to Vanessa. 6 months suspension without pay, mandatory bias training and psychological evaluation. Community service with the Meridian Heights Reconciliation Project. If and only if you complete all requirements satisfactorily, you may apply for reinstatement at reduced rank. Vanessa nodded numbly, unable to meet either of their eyes. As Marcus and Alexandra walked out together, the precinct remained silent, the air heavy with unspoken recognition of a systemic failure personified in one officer's actions. Outside, the evening had deepened into twilight, the city lights creating halos in the humid air. "You didn't have to show mercy," Alexandra said quietly as they reached her car. Marcus looked up at the stars emerging above the city skyline. It wasn't mercy, it was strategy. Firing her makes her a martyr to those who share her views. Requiring her to learn and grow creates the possibility of actual change. Alexandra took his hand, her fingers tracing the outline of the gold bracelet. "Your grandfather would be proud." "He would be furious this is still happening 50 years after he fought the same battles," Marcus replied. "But he would also say what he always said. Justice without transformation is just revenge." They finished together. The drive home was quiet, both lost in thought. Their sons would be waiting, homework spread across the kitchen table, teenage energy filling the house with noise and life. How would they explain what had happened? How could they protect their children from a world that viewed their very existence with suspicion? "The boys don't need to know," Marcus said finally, as if reading her thoughts. Alexandra gripped the steering wheel tighter. "They need to know, Marcus. Not to frighten them, but to prepare them. We can't shield them forever." Marcus sighed, the weight of parental responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. "I know. I just wanted them to be children a little longer before they had to carry this burden." "They're black boys in America," Alexandra replied softly. "They already carry it, whether we acknowledge it or not." When they arrived home, their sons, Jamal and Devin, looked up from their homework with matching expressions of concern. News traveled fast in the digital age. Videos of the arrest had already begun circulating online. "Dad, are you okay?" Jamal, the older at 14, asked immediately. "We saw the videos." Marcus embraced his sons, holding them tighter than usual. "I'm fine. It was a misunderstanding that's been resolved." Devin, 12 and already showing signs of his father's perceptiveness, frowned. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. That officer arrested you because you're black." The blunt assessment hung in the air, impossible to deny without lying to their children. Marcus and Alexandra exchanged glances, a silent communication born of years together. "You're right," Marcus acknowledged, sitting down at the kitchen table, "and we need to talk about it." That night, they had the conversation that millions of black families have had throughout American history, the careful instructions on how to survive encounters with those sworn to protect and serve, the unfair burden of having to be twice as careful, twice as respectful, twice as aware. The boys listened solemnly, asking questions that no child should have to ask, absorbing lessons that no child should have to learn. Before bed, Devin approached his father, fingering the gold bracelet that had triggered the day's events. "Maybe you shouldn't wear this anymore, Dad." Marcus knelt to meet his son's eyes. "This bracelet belonged to your great-grandfather, who fought his entire life so that we could exist with dignity. I wear it to honor him and to remind myself that what we have wasn't freely given, it was earned through struggle and sacrifice. I won't hide it, and I won't hide who I am." Devin nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his young face. "Then I want to wear it someday too." "You will," Marcus promised, "and hopefully by then, it will just be a beautiful bracelet, not a target." The following morning, Meridian Heights awoke to headlines and viral videos. Police commissioner's husband racially profiled and wrongfully arrested blazed across social media platforms and news outlets. Public outrage was immediate and intense, with calls for Vanessa's termination competing with broader demands for departmental reform. Alexandra's phone rang incessantly, the mayor, city council members, community leaders, all demanding explanations and action. She handled each call with the same measured composure she'd displayed at the precinct, neither downplaying the incident nor allowing it to be weaponized for political gain. "This isn't about one officer or one arrest," she told the mayor firmly. "This is about systems that enable and protect biased policing." Officer Caldwell has been suspended and will undergo extensive retraining, but that's just the beginning. We need structural change. The mayor, ever conscious of political implications, sighed audibly. "Alexandra, you know I support your reforms, but this is becoming a PR nightmare. The police union is already pushing back, claiming you're using your position to pursue a personal vendetta. It became personal when my husband was handcuffed for existing while black," Alexandra replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "But it was already personal for every black citizen who's been profiled, detained, or worse. The difference is that Marcus has platforms and protections that others don't. If we don't use this moment to drive meaningful change, we're complicit." Meanwhile, Vanessa Caldwell sat alone in her apartment, blinds drawn against the morning light, scrolling through thousands of comments condemning her actions. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, some offering support, others distancing themselves from the scandal. She had become, overnight, what every officer feared, a symbol of everything wrong with policing in America. Her father had called twice, leaving voicemails that oscillated between defensive outrage and disappointed concern. "This isn't how I raised you," he said in the second message, his voice heavy with emotion. "We're police because we protect people, all people. Call me back, Vanessa. We need to talk about this." But she couldn't bring herself to call him, couldn't bear to hear the disappointment in his voice. Instead, she sat immobilized by shame and fear, watching her career and identity crumble in real time on social media. When her doorbell rang, she ignored it, assuming reporters or protesters. The persistent knocking finally drove her to peek through the peephole. Standing in the hallway was Dr. Marcus Ellison. She opened the door cautiously, unable to meet his eyes. "Dr. Ellison, I didn't expect to see you again." "May I come in?" he asked simply. Vanessa stepped aside wordlessly, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance contrasting with his composed professionalism. He declined her offer to sit, instead remaining standing in her small living room. "Why are you here?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because firing you solves nothing," he replied. "It might satisfy public outrage temporarily, but it doesn't address the underlying issues that led to yesterday's incident." Vanessa's shoulders slumped. "I've lost everything. My career, my reputation." "You haven't lost anything permanently," Marcus interrupted. "You've been given an opportunity to rebuild both on a stronger foundation." He handed her a business card. "This is Dr. Renee Washington. She runs the Implicit Bias Rehabilitation Program at Meridian University. Your first session is tomorrow at 9 a.m. Vanessa stared at the card. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Because my grandfather taught me that true justice isn't about punishment, it's about transformation. He spent his life fighting systems, not individuals. The system failed you as much as you failed me. I don't deserve a second chance," she said, tears finally breaking through her composure. "This isn't about what you deserve," Marcus replied. "It's about what our community deserves. Officers who can acknowledge their mistakes and commit to genuine change." As he turned to leave, Vanessa called after him. "Dr. Ellison, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am truly sorry." Marcus paused at the door. "Prove it, not with words, but with actions." That's all any of us can do. After he left, Vanessa sat with the business card, turning it over in her hands. She thought about her father, a third-generation police officer who had taught her that the badge was sacred because it represented service to all. She thought about her academy graduation, where she had sworn an oath to protect and serve with integrity and respect. Somewhere along the way, she had lost sight of those principles, allowing bias and arrogance to corrupt her purpose. She picked up her phone and dialed her father's number. When he answered, his voice was gruff with emotion. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "I need help." "I know, sweetheart," he replied softly. "We all do sometimes." The Implicit Bias Rehabilitation Program was housed in a modern building on Meridian University's campus. Vanessa arrived early, dressed in civilian clothes that felt foreign after years in uniform. The waiting room was filled with some police officers, others teachers, healthcare workers, even corporate executives. All were there for the same reason, confronting the biases that had damaged their careers and harmed others. Dr. Washington entered precisely at 9 a.m. A tall black woman with silver-streaked dreadlocks and penetrating eyes that seemed to see through pretense. She didn't smile or offer platitudes. She simply said, "Let's begin." The first session was brutal in its honesty. Participants shared incidents that had brought them there, a teacher who consistently disciplined black students more harshly, a doctor who dismissed a Latina patient's pain as dramatic, a hiring manager who never seemed to find qualified candidates of color. When Vanessa's turn came, her voice shook as she recounted the arrest. "I saw his bracelet, and something just triggered in me," she admitted. "I couldn't believe someone like him could own something like that legitimately." "Someone like him?" Dr. Washington pressed. "A black man," Vanessa whispered, the words hanging in the air like an indictment. "And why couldn't a black man own an expensive bracelet?" Dr. Washington continued, her tone neither accusatory nor forgiving, simply probing. Vanessa struggled to articulate the thoughts that had seemed so natural in the moment. I guess I assumed." "Yes, you assumed," Dr. Washington nodded. "And that's where we begin with the assumptions that feel so natural we don't even recognize them as choices." Over the following weeks, Vanessa deconstructed a lifetime of conditioning. She examined her upbringing in a predominantly white suburb, where success was attributed to hard work rather than privilege. She confronted the subtle messaging from her police academy training that emphasized threat assessment based on demographic factors rather than behavioral cues. She recognized patterns in her arrest record that revealed unconscious targeting of minorities for minor infractions she might have overlooked in white citizens. The work was exhausting, often leaving her emotionally drained. Some days she wanted to quit, to retreat into defensiveness or self-pity. But the image of Marcus Ellison's dignified restraint as she handcuffed him kept her returning to the difficult sessions. In her third week, Dr. Washington assigned a particularly challenging exercise. Vanessa had to review body camera footage from her previous arrests, analyzing her language, tone, and behavior for evidence of bias. The patterns were undeniable and deeply disturbing. She watched herself speak condescendingly to black suspects while maintaining professional courtesy with white ones. She saw herself escalate minor infractions into arrests when the subjects were people of color, while issuing warnings to white citizens for identical offenses. "I don't understand," she confessed during group discussion. "I never thought of myself as racist. My partner at the academy was black. I have friends who are minorities." "Having black friends doesn't inoculate you against bias," Dr. Washington explained. "In fact, it can sometimes reinforce it by creating the illusion of immunity." I can't be biased because I have black friends becomes a shield against self-examination. A fellow officer in the program, Rodriguez, nodded in recognition. I used to think the same way. I'm Latino, so I figured I couldn't be biased against other minorities. But then I realized I was policing black neighborhoods differently than white ones, expecting criminality instead of community. Vanessa looked at him with newfound respect. How did you change? By admitting I had a problem, Rodriguez replied simply, just like you're doing now. 3 months into her suspension, Vanessa began volunteer work with the Meridian Heights Reconciliation Project. Her first assignment was assisting with a community forum where residents could share experiences with law enforcement. She sat silently at the back, listening as speaker after speaker described encounters that mirrored what she had done to Dr. Elisant: the assumptions, the disrespect, the fear. An elderly black man approached the microphone, leaning heavily on a cane. I'm 78 years old, he began, and I've been stopped by police more times than I can count. Not once was I ever given the benefit of the doubt. Not once was I presumed innocent. My grandson is 12, and last month, an officer stopped him while he was riding his new bicycle, assuming it was stolen. Some things never change. Vanessa felt tears streaming down her face, no longer able to maintain professional detachment. After the forum, she approached the project coordinator. I want to do more, she said simply, whatever is needed. The coordinator studied her face. There's a youth program starting next week. Kids from neighborhoods with high police presence learning their rights and how to safely navigate encounters with law enforcement. They need volunteers. Officers? Vanessa asked hesitantly. Former officers, the coordinator corrected. People who understand the system from the inside but can now see it from the outside too. The youth program became Vanessa's salvation. 3 afternoons a week, she worked with teenagers, many of whom initially regarded her with open hostility. She didn't defend the system or herself. She simply acknowledged their experiences as valid and offered practical strategies for staying safe during police encounters. Gradually, something shifted. The teens began asking questions, sharing stories, even laughing occasionally. One boy, Jamal, who had been particularly resistant, approached her after a session. My brother got arrested last year, he said abruptly. Cops planted drugs on him. Nobody believed him. Vanessa nodded, not offering empty reassurances. I believe him. Jamal studied her face. Would you have believed him before, when you were a cop? The question cut to the heart of her transformation. No, she admitted. I probably wouldn't have. And that's why I'm here now. Jamal considered this. My mom says people don't change. Most don't, Vanessa agreed. Because change is painful. It means admitting you were wrong, and that's the hardest thing for anyone to do. So why are you doing it? He pressed. Vanessa thought about Marcus Ellison, about the dignity in his eyes, even as she humiliated him. Because I saw what I was becoming, and I didn't like it. Because someone gave me a chance to be better when they could have destroyed me. Jamal nodded slowly. That's real. Most people just talk. The following week, Jamal brought 2 friends to the program. The week after that, 5 more came. Word spread through the neighborhood. The cop who admitted she was wrong was teaching kids how to stay safe from cops like she used to be. Meanwhile, Alexandra Ellison faced challenges of her own. The police union had filed a formal complaint, alleging that her handling of Vanessa's case constituted a conflict of interest. The mayor, initially supportive, began suggesting that perhaps she should recuse herself from the investigation. Political pressure mounted as conservative media outlets portrayed her as an activist commissioner using her position to advance a personal agenda. "They're trying to undermine everything we've built," she told Marcus one night, pacing their bedroom in frustration. "They're using this incident to discredit all the reforms we've implemented." Marcus watched her with concern. "Maybe you should step back from Vanessa's case. Let internal affairs handle it independently." Alexandra stopped pacing. "If I do that, I'm conceding their point that I can't be objective because it involved you. But this isn't about you or me. It's about a pattern of behavior that affects our entire community." "I know," Marcus said gently, "but sometimes you have to make tactical retreats to win the larger battle." Alexandra sighed, sitting beside him on the bed. "When did you become the political strategist in this family?" "I've been married to one long enough to learn a few things," he replied with a small smile. "Besides, surgeons understand that sometimes you have to sacrifice one approach to save the patient." The next morning, Alexandra announced that she would recuse herself from direct oversight of Vanessa's case but would continue advancing departmental reforms. It was a compromise that satisfied neither her critics nor her supporters entirely, but it allowed her to maintain her position and authority. "This incident has highlighted the urgent need for structural change within our department," she stated at a press conference. "While I will not personally oversee Officer Caldwell's case to avoid any perception of bias, I remain committed to addressing the systemic issues it has exposed." As months passed, Vanessa continued her work with the youth program while progressing through Dr. Washington's rehabilitation curriculum. She began keeping a journal, documenting her evolving understanding of bias and privilege. One entry read, "Today I realized that what I called instinct or gut feeling as an officer was often just bias dressed up as professional judgment. I stopped Marcus Ellison because his bracelet triggered something in me's belief that black success must be illegitimate. Where did that come from? Not from my father or my formal training, but from 1,000 subtle messages absorbed over a lifetime TV shows where the criminals were disproportionately black. News reports that emphasized race when suspects were minorities, but not when they were white. Casual comments from fellow officers about those neighborhoods. I didn't create these biases, but I internalized them, and worse, I acted on them with the authority of a badge and gun." Dr. Washington read this entry during a one-on-one session and nodded approvingly. "This is significant progress, Vanessa. You're not just acknowledging bias, you're tracing its origins and recognizing its manifestations." "But is understanding enough?" Vanessa asked. "Does it undo the harm I've caused?" "Understanding is just the beginning," Dr. Washington replied. "The real work is in changing behaviors and systems. That's a lifetime commitment, not a 6-month program." 6 months after the incident, Vanessa received notice that her reinstatement hearing was scheduled. She had completed all requirements: the bias training, psychological evaluations, community service hours, yet she felt profoundly uncertain about returning to the force. The night before the hearing, she sat at her kitchen table writing a letter. It wasn't addressed to the review board or to Commissioner Ellison. It was addressed to Dr. Marcus Ellison. "I won't ask for your forgiveness," she wrote. "What I did cannot be undone with words, but I want you to know that the person who arrested you that day no longer exists. In her place is someone who recognizes that a badge is not a shield from accountability, but a commitment to it. Tomorrow I will request reinstatement, not because I feel entitled to wear the uniform again, but because I believe reformed officers are essential to reforming the system. If the board denies my request, I will accept their decision and continue the work I've begun in other ways. Either path is a form of service, and service sano pauris what I now understand the badge to represent." The reinstatement hearing was held in a small conference room at headquarters. Commissioner Alexandra Ellison sat at the center of the review panel, her expression neutral as Vanessa entered. To Alexandra's right sat Dr. Washington, and to her left unexpectedly sat Dr. Marcus Ellison. Vanessa's step faltered briefly before she composed herself and took the seat across from them. "Officer Caldwell," Alexandra began formally, "you've completed all required remediation programs and community service hours. Your evaluations from Dr. Washington indicate significant progress in addressing implicit bias patterns. Before we make our determination, do you have anything you wish to say to this panel?" Vanessa had prepared a statement, carefully crafted to demonstrate professional growth and commitment to departmental values. Instead, she set her notes aside and spoke directly to Marcus. "6 months ago, I arrested you without cause because I couldn't imagine a world where you legitimately belonged in the space you occupied. I couldn't see past my own assumptions to recognize your humanity. I'm not here to convince you I've become a perfect person or will be a perfect officer. I'm here because I believe the department needs people who have confronted their own capacity for injustice and are committed to vigilance against it." She turned to Alexandra. "If you decide I don't deserve to wear the badge again, I will respect that decision. The work I've begun doesn't require a uniform to continue." The panel conferred quietly for several minutes before Alexandra addressed her again. "Officer Caldwell, your reinstatement is approved with conditions. You will return at the rank of patrol officer, with a 1-year probationary period. You will continue bias training monthly and will serve as a peer educator in the department's new accountability initiative. Additionally, you will partner with the Meridian Heights Reconciliation Project to develop training protocols for new recruits." Vanessa nodded, accepting the terms without protest. As the hearing concluded, Marcus approached her. "Officer Caldwell." "Dr. Ellison," she replied, meeting his gaze directly for the first time since the arrest. "I received your letter," he said. "It was unnecessary but appreciated." "I meant every word," she replied. "I know," he said simply. "That's why I advocated for your reinstatement." Vanessa's surprise must have shown on her face because Marcus continued, "The department doesn't need more officers who've never made mistakes. It needs officers who have faced their failures and committed to doing better." Vanessa's return to active duty was met with mixed reactions. Some officers welcomed her back, impressed by her commitment to growth. Others maintained a cool distance, either disapproving of her original actions or resentful of what they perceived as special treatment. The community response was similarly divided, with some activists protesting her reinstatement, while others cautiously supported the rehabilitation approach. Her first day back, she was assigned to desk duty processing reports and handling walk-in complaints. It was mundane work, far from the street patrols she had once considered the real police work, but she approached it with newfound humility. Each citizen who approached her desk received her full attention and respect, regardless of appearance or background. During her lunch break, she noticed a familiar face entering the station. Jamal, the teenager from the youth program. He spotted her and approached hesitantly. "Officer Caldwell, you're back on the force?" She nodded. "As of today, probationary status." Jamal studied her uniform with conflicted emotions. "Does this mean you're not coming to the program anymore?" "I'll still be there," she assured him. "It's part of my conditions for reinstatement, but more importantly, I want to be there." He seemed to consider this. "My cousin got stopped yesterday. The officer made him empty his backpack on the sidewalk in front of everyone. School books everywhere. Made him feel like nothing." Vanessa felt the familiar ache of recognition. "I'm sorry that happened to him. That's exactly why I need to be both here and at the program to try to change things from the inside and the outside." "You think that's possible?" Jamal asked skeptically. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I have to try." As the months passed, Vanessa navigated her dual roles: officer and educator with growing confidence. She began documenting problematic patterns she observed within the department, not as a whistleblower, but as an advocate for improvement. When she witnessed fellow officers using biased language or employing unnecessary force, she intervened directly or reported the incidents through proper channels. This approach didn't win her popularity contests. Some colleagues labeled her a traitor or accused her of playing politics to advance her career. But others, particularly younger officers and those from minority backgrounds, found in her an unexpected ally and mentor. 6 months into her probation, Vanessa was approached by Captain Reynolds. "Caldwell, I've been reviewing your performance reports. Solid work at the desk, but I think it's time you got back on patrol." Vanessa tensed slightly. "Are you sure that's wise, sir? Given my history?" Reynolds nodded. "That's precisely why it's necessary. You've done the work, shown the commitment. Now you need to prove it where it matters most, in the streets." Her first patrol shift was in the predominantly black neighborhood of Westwood Heights, on assignment that felt deliberately symbolic. As she and her new partner, Officer Chen, drove through the community, Vanessa felt the weight of scrutiny from residents who recognized her from news coverage of the incident. "Tough crowd," Chen commented as a group of teenagers tracked their cruiser with hostile stares. "They have reason to be wary," Vanessa replied. "We have to earn their trust, not demand it." Chen glanced at her curiously. "You really have changed, haven't you? I remember when you used to say respect for the badge was non-negotiable." "The badge deserves respect," Vanessa said thoughtfully, "but so do the people we serve. It goes both ways." Their shift was nearly over when the call came: unsuspected break-in at a residence on Maple Street. As they approached the address, they observed a young black man in his 20s exiting the side door of the house with a duffel bag. "Police, stop right there," Chen called out, immediately drawing his weapon. The young man froze, then slowly raised his hands, the duffel bag dropping to the ground. "I live here," he said, his voice steady but edged with familiar fear. "This is my house." Vanessa approached cautiously, noting details that didn't align with a typical break-in. The man was well-dressed, wearing a university sweatshirt. The side door showed no signs of forced entry. Family photos visible through the window appeared to include him. "Sir, we received a report of a break-in at this address," she explained calmly. "Can you provide identification confirming your residence here?" "My wallet's in my back pocket," he replied. "I'm going to reach for it slowly, okay?" "That's fine," Vanessa assured him, signaling Chen to lower his weapon. "What's your name?" "Devin Ellison," he answered, carefully retrieving his wallet. "I'm home from college for the weekend. My parents aren't expecting mates a surprise for my dad's birthday." Vanessa felt a chill run through her as she examined his driver's license. The address matched, and the name Ellison couldn't be coincidence. This was Marcus and Alexandra's son, the boy who had wanted to inherit his great-grandfather's bracelet someday. "Everything appears to be in order, Mr. Ellison," she said, returning his ID. "I apologize for the inconvenience. Someone in the neighborhood reported suspicious activity, but clearly there's been a misunderstanding." Devin studied her face, recognition dawning. "You're her, aren't you? The officer who arrested my father." Chen looked between them in confusion. Vanessa nodded, maintaining her professional composure despite the churning in her stomach. "Yes, I am, and I want to apologize to you as well. What I did affected your entire family, not just your father." Devin picked up his duffel bag, his expression unreadable. "He told us you'd changed, that you were doing the work to be better." "I'm trying," Vanessa replied honestly. Devon nodded slowly. Then I guess we're both where we need to be right now. As they returned to the cruiser, Chen whistled low. That was intense. You handled it well, though. No, Vanessa corrected. I handled it appropriately. There's a difference. Well, would have been not needing to question him at all because no one called in a suspicious person report just for seeing a black man enter his own home. That evening, Vanessa filed a detailed report about the incident, noting that the original caller had described a suspicious individual without providing specific behaviors that warranted concern. She recommended community outreach to address racially motivated calls and suggested additional training for dispatch operators on eliciting concrete details rather than accepting vague reports of suspicion. The report made its way to Commissioner Ellison's desk, where it joined a growing stack of similar incidents documented by officers throughout the department. Alexandra recognized Vanessa's name on the report and read it with particular attention, noting the address and realizing it involved her own son. Instead of anger, she felt a complex mixture of vindication and hope the system she was working to reform had shown progress, however small. She picked up her phone and dialed Marcus's number. "You were right," she said when he answered. "About Caldwell, about transformation being possible." "What happened?" he asked. She just had an encounter with Devon, handled it by the book, respectful, professional, no escalation. Then she filed a report highlighting the problematic nature of the call itself and recommending systemic changes. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "One officer at a time," he said finally. "That's how change happens." "It's not enough," Alexandra sighed. "Not fast enough, not comprehensive enough." "No," Marcus agreed, "but it's something, and something is better than nothing." 1 year after the incident that had transformed both their lives, Marcus Ellison and Vanessa Caldwell found themselves at the same community event, a fundraiser for the Meridian Heights Reconciliation Project. They hadn't spoken directly since her reinstatement hearing, though their paths had crossed professionally several times. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, community leaders and activists mingling with police officers and city officials in an atmosphere of cautious optimism. Alexandra was delivering the keynote address, her voice carrying through the room with practiced authority. A year ago, an incident occurred that could have been just another statistic, another example of the divide between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Instead, it became a catalyst for change, not because it was unique, but because we refused to let it be business as usual. From opposite sides of the room, Marcus and Vanessa listened, each reflecting on their individual journeys since that day on Whitman Boulevard. "Real change isn't about policies alone," Alexandra continued. "It's about people willing to do the difficult, uncomfortable work of confronting bias and rebuilding trust. It's about officers who view accountability not as a threat but as a responsibility. And it's about communities willing to engage in dialogue even after trust has been broken." After the speech, as guests mingled over dessert and coffee, Vanessa approached Marcus cautiously. "Dr. Ellison, congratulations on your new research grant. I read about it in the paper." "Thank you, Officer Caldwell," he replied, "and congratulations on your appointment to the training division. I understand your curriculum on bias recognition is being adopted by departments across the state." Vanessa nodded, a hint of pride breaking through her professional demeanor. "It's still a work in progress, but we're seeing promising results in new recruits' field assessments." A comfortable silence fell between them, not the awkward tension of their previous encounters, but the quiet acknowledgement of a shared journey. "Your bracelet," Vanessa noted, gesturing to his wrist where the gold heirloom gleamed under the ballroom lights. "You still wear it?" "Always," Marcus replied. "Some things are too important to hide, even when they make us targets." Vanessa considered this. I used to see it as just an expensive object. Now I see it as a symbol of something much more valuable. What's that? Marcus asked. Legacy, she replied. The kind that can't be stolen or arrested or diminished. The kind that transforms, lives across generations. Marcus extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Vanessa shook it a simple gesture that represented something profound. Not forgiveness or friendship, but mutual recognition of humanity and shared purpose. Across the room, Alexandra watched the interaction with a mixture of emotions. The system was still deeply flawed, the work far from complete. But, in that handshake, she saw a microcosm of what was possible: accountability without destruction, growth without compromise, justice with transformation. As the evening concluded, guests departed with commemorative pins bearing the project's motto, "Justice without transformation is just revenge." Vanessa pinned hers to her uniform lapel, where it caught the light as she stepped into the night air. Above her, stars punctuated the darkness, each one a distant reminder that even the smallest light matters in the vastness of shadow. 1 year later, Meridian Heights Police Department hosted a community recognition ceremony. Among those honored was Officer Vanessa Caldwell, receiving an award for her work developing the department's bias intervention training program, now being adopted by agencies across the state. As she accepted the plaque, she spotted Dr. Marcus Ellison in the audience, the gold bracelet still gleaming on his wrist. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a small nod of forgiveness or absolution, but of acknowledgement. Some debts could never be fully repaid, some wounds never completely healed. But transformation was possible, and in that possibility lay hope for a system that had failed them both. After the ceremony, a young officer approached Vanessa. "Is it true what they say, that you arrested the commissioner's husband?" Vanessa looked at the eager face, recognizing the same certainty she once possessed. "What's true is that I made a terrible mistake based on assumptions I didn't even recognize I was making. And what's true is that mistake nearly cost me everything, but instead became the beginning of something better." She touched the badge on her uniform, feeling its weight differently now. "This isn't power," she said quietly. "It's responsibility. Remember that, and you might avoid learning it the hard way." As she walked out into the evening air, Vanessa glanced up at the department's newly installed motto, gleaming in bronze letters above the entrance. "Justice without transformation is just revenge." The words caught the last light of day, glowing like a promiser, perhaps a warning to all who passed beneath them. The young officer watched her go, then turned to find Commissioner Ellison standing beside him. "She's quite something," the rookie commented. "Hard to believe she was almost fired a couple years ago." Alexandra smiled slightly. Officer Caldwell wasn't saved by leniency. She was transformed by accountability. There's a difference. "Yes, ma'am," the rookie nodded, not entirely understanding but sensing the importance of the distinction. "My husband has a saying," Alexandra continued. "The measure of a system isn't how it treats those who follow the rules, but how it responds when the rules are broken. Remember that when you're out there wearing that badge." As Alexandra walked away, the rookie looked down at his gleaming badge, seeing it not as a symbol of authority but as a promise he would be held to by his superiors, by the community, and most importantly, by himself. Across town, Marcus Ellison sat with his sons in their living room, the gold bracelet catching the lamplight as he gestured during their conversation. "Dad," Devin asked, now a college sophomore studying pre-law, "do you think things have really changed since what happened with Officer Caldwell?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Some things have changed, some people have changed, but systems change slowly and often reluctantly." "Then what's the point?" Jamal asked. the idealism of youth evident in his frustration. If the system is so resistant to change, why keep trying? Marcus smiled, touching the bracelet that had become so much more than an heirloom. Because resistance isn't the same as impossibility. Your great-grandfather used to say that justice is never given, it's always claimed. Each generation has to claim it anew, in their own way, for their own time. The brothers exchanged glances, absorbing their father's words. Outside their window, Meridian Heights continued its evening rhythm, people returning home from work, children playing in parks, officers patrolling streets. A city like any other, flawed and hopeful, wounded and healing, all at once. So what do we do? Devon asked finally. We keep walking proudly, Marcus replied, wearing our metaphorical gold bracelets for all to see. We claim the space we deserve without apology. And when the system fails, as it sometimes will, we don't just demand accountability, we insist on transformation. The bracelet gleamed in the lamplight, a circle without beginning or end, much like the work of justice. It's continuous, unfinished, necessary. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.